Here's what happens if the U.S. Education Department is dissolved. Imagine a world without a federal education department. Is it chaos or opportunity? Established in 1979, this department impacts over 50 million K-12 students and millions of college students through funding, oversight, and protections for vulnerable groups. But what if it vanished? Let's break it down. The U.S. Education Department ensures educational equity through programs like Title I for low-income students and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act for children with disabilities. It monitors civil rights compliance, supports teachers, and oversees financial aid for college students. Losing this framework could rearrange America's education landscape entirely. Without federal leadership, states would bear the full weight of managing K-12 education. Programs like Title I, which fund disadvantaged schools, might become block grants, leaving states to decide how to allocate funds. The risk? Inequalities could deepen, especially in low-income, under-resourced communities. Accountability measures like standardized testing and federal benchmarks may weaken or disappear altogether. This could mean inconsistent education standards, with students' futures depending entirely on the state they live in. Imagine graduating with different credentials simply because of your zip code. The Office for Civil Rights, which currently investigates discrimination in education, would likely move to the Department of Justice. While justice is critical, losing an education-specific office could delay or dilute responses to issues like racial discrimination, harassment, and unequal opportunities. Students from marginalized communities could face uneven protections. A complaint about discrimination in a school may no longer receive the focus and expertise it does under the Education Department. This would leave families questioning where to turn for justice. Think about Pell Grants, federal work-study programs, or low-interest student loans. Would they still exist? Likely yes, but with funding decided at the state level, programs could vary widely. Pell Grant amounts may shrink, leaving students with fewer options to afford higher education. Without department oversight, colleges might face less pressure to maintain affordability and transparency. This could result in increased tuition and diminished access for low-income and first-generation college students. Federal reporting on graduation rates and job readiness could also disappear, leaving students with less data for informed choices. Dissolving the Education Department would shift primary responsibility to states, empowering them but also increasing disparities. Wealthy states might sustain or even improve education quality, while struggling states could face budget cuts, uneven program quality, and severe gaps in educational access. Block grants could give states flexibility, but without federal oversight, how can we guarantee that funds will reach the students who need them the most? Wealthier districts might thrive while weaker communities lose lifelines, exacerbating existing education inequalities. A fragmented education system could harm the country's ability to compete globally. Federal oversight ensures consistent academic benchmarks, preparing students for higher education and global challenges. Without it, we may lose innovations, teachers, and students to better supported systems abroad. What would happen to special needs protections? If the U.S. Department of Education were to be dissolved, it wouldn't necessarily mean that all federal education laws would disappear. Key policies like the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which funds K-12 schools, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which ensures students with disabilities receive the support they need, would still exist, as long as Congress continues to fund them. However, without the Education Department overseeing these programs, the responsibility would fall entirely on individual states. This could have the biggest impact on vulnerable students, including those with special needs. Right now, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act funding is distributed based on the number of students with disabilities, and states are expected to match a portion of that funding. Currently, federal dollars cover about 12% to 13% of the cost of special education services. If the Department of Education no longer existed, that funding would likely be given to states as block grants, meaning they'd have more control, but also less federal oversight to ensure those funds are used properly. Some experts warn this could lead to major disparities in how students with disabilities receive support across the country. That means school districts would have full control over how they use the funds, with no guarantee that the money would be spent on supporting students with disabilities. Without oversight, there would be no way to ensure that students with IEPs receive the resources and services they need. Similarly, what would happen to Title I funding? Title I funding is designed to support students from low-income families, providing resources like educational technology, remedial instruction materials, internet access, and mental health services. In 2022, this program received $15.6 billion in federal funding. If the Education Department were eliminated, Title I funds would likely shift to block grants, giving states more control but also creating a chaotic transition. Experts warn this could lead to delays, misallocation of funds, and negative impacts on test scores, attendance, graduation rates, and student engagement. While some argue that reducing federal oversight would give states more flexibility, history has shown that without safeguards, the money may not reach the students who need it most. If the Department of Education is dismantled, Title I funding could be significantly cut, leaving states to fill the financial gap. The extent of those cuts remains uncertain, but the loss of federal support could have a profound impact on education equity. If the Education Department were eliminated, some of its responsibilities would likely be transferred to other federal agencies. This shift could make it much harder for families to address civil rights violations in schools. Instead of relying on the Education Department to investigate complaints, parents would likely need to pursue legal action on their own, which can be costly and complicated. Without a dedicated agency overseeing these protections, families could face more obstacles in fighting discrimination based on race, gender, disability, or national origin in schools. Moreover, the department plays a pivotal role in emergency relief, such as distributing funds during the pandemic. Without a single authority, responses to future crises could be slower and less effective. Students, from hurricane-hit regions to struggling cities, would bear the consequences. Proposals to dissolve the department are often ideological, focusing on local control. But what's next if it happens? Who guarantees a fair chance for every student, regardless of their background? Parents, educators, and citizens must advocate for equity and inclusion in any new system. The fate of the Education Department affects more than policies. It shapes futures. Federal oversight ensures fairness, protects vulnerable students, and unites a diverse nation under shared educational goals. Without it, inequities could grow, and national progress could stall. The stakes couldn't be higher. The debate over education policy often comes down to differing views on the federal government's role. Some believe that decisions about education should be made at the state and local levels, rather than by the federal government. This ongoing discussion is happening at a time when public confidence in education is declining, with rising concerns about the cost of college and dissatisfaction with the quality of K-12 education. To stay ahead of potential changes, families should stay informed about new policies and how they might impact students. Don't hesitate to ask questions, research updates, and engage with school officials to ensure your child's education remains a priority. At the same time, experts advise against making drastic decisions too soon. Students should still apply for financial aid, scholarships, and grants as usual, rather than assuming funding will disappear. Changing long-term education plans before any official decisions are made could result in missed opportunities. Parents and advocates should also push education leaders and elected officials to explain how they will protect students' rights and ensure that Title I schools continue to receive funding. By staying informed and proactive, families can navigate these changes without unnecessary disruption. Our education system is the backbone of opportunity. Want a say in its future? Share this video, debate with friends, and join movements advocating for equity and access. Education doesn't wait. Take action today, because tomorrow depends on what we do now.